Today I have 3 scales for you that I think every bass player should know. We're going to take a look at how they're constructed. We're going to look at some context in terms of the harmony they outline. We're going to get to working on them in all 12 keys. And I think maybe most important of all, because these are quite simple things that I'm sure most people watching already know, the real value when working on them comes from understanding all the different fingerings with your fretting hand that are possible. Now, why are scales on my mind? Scales are kind of always on my mind because they're such an important foundation, such an important building block of all music, no matter what genre, what style you play in. But scales are especially on my mind right now because in just a few weeks, we are releasing the Bassist's book of scales, arpeggios, and studies. It's available for pre-order right now. It's linked in the description of this video, signed copies bundled with a digital copy of the book. That's our pre-sale offer at a special discounted price that runs until November 26, 2024. The book comes out November 27th, and it's been an incredible labor of love putting this together. I really believe this is going to be the reference book for every kind of scale, arpeggio, and broken chord in Western music. I've done deep dives on so many cool sounds, of course, all the fundamentals, the basics, the modes, but also getting super deep into some other sounds, some other scales that perhaps you weren't aware of. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll give you a little sneak preview into some things that may be a little unusual to your ear, but are super fun to integrate into the practice routine. And they're a great challenge when you want to push your playing, when you want to improve that foundation and your fundamental technique as a bass player. Let's get into scale number 1. It is the major scale. It doesn't come a lot simpler than this. That's it, a 1 octave major scale. I think it's actually really important to be able to play that anywhere on the neck. And my first suggestion to you is that you work on scales of any tonality in at least 2 octaves. And when you start having position shifts, you start getting into a ton of options. There are just so many places you can change position, and where you shift position really depends on where you start, which finger you start on with your fretting hand. The classic 1 octave shape for a major scale is 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. I'm pretty sure most people watching will have played that shape before. If not, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. Classic shape, classic fingering for a 1 octave major scale. Exactly the same thing coming down. Now, I highlight the fact that it's exactly the same thing coming down here because when we get into 2 octaves, when we get into position shifts, that's not always the case. Now, it's going to be slightly different for everyone. Everyone is going to have their own preference as to where it feels most natural, most comfortable to shift when playing a 2 octave major scale. There's no right or wrong way to do it. There's just the way that feels best for you. And I'm going to give you a bunch of options to work on so you can explore on your own time. Maybe you like starting out with the first finger here. So we go 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. So we're playing 3 notes per string. And we can carry on that theme of playing 3 notes per string where we go 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. Now we're up to the 5th in our 2nd octave and we need a shift. So from our 4th finger on the G, 12th fret, I like to go 1st finger on the A, 1, 3, 4, up to our root note in the top there. So again, slowly, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. Now we can experiment coming down exactly the same way, just put it in reverse. So that's identical fingering, both ascending and descending. But now here's where it gets super interesting, super fun, and where the kind of options are almost endless depending on what works for you, what feels the most comfortable and the most natural. We could start out shifting on the A string, for instance. So we go 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 4. And no matter how you get up there, there are another ton of options for getting down, and we don't have to come down the same way. There's no hard and fast rule about that. So an option for coming down that doesn't match the way we ascended this scale could be 4, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1, shift on the first finger, and then 4, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2. And just a minor detail at the end, instead of going 4-2, you could go 3-1. So you start to see how many minor changes you can make to create just dozens and dozens of options for ascending and descending, probably the most basic scale we have in our repertoire. I mentioned briefly before the importance of playing this in all 12 keys. More often than not, I like to create an exercise with the tonality with the scale, so it's not just a major scale in 2 octaves, ascending and descending. With a 4-string bass here, I like to play so you get this little pause at the bottom and this pause at the top. We're going up as far as the 11th or the 4th, the F natural, and coming down again. So there are no position shifts with this. Our position shifts will happen when we move it around in all 12 keys. So we'll start off in C. We'll go to F, to B flat, and we're just moving in a cycle of fourths. Every time moving up a fourth. We'll go to A flat now, D flat, G flat, and of course there are going to be times where there's an option to play in multiple octaves, so like G flat up here starting on the 14th fret. I also like to make sure I'm really working the other muscles and that kind of more strenuous position to play in down here on fret 2. That's much more of a stretch that gives the fingers more of a workout. So whenever there's an option to play it in 2 octaves, maintaining the same shape, I really try and make sure I'm doing that every time. And I fly through the cycle of fourths. I make sure I play it in all 12 keys. For scale number 2, in terms of popularity, especially with fretted stringed instruments, hello, yes, all you bass players and or guitar players out there, it has to be undoubtedly the minor pentatonic. What a very simple scale to play, what a very useful scale to play. And whether you're aware of it or not, it's something you've heard millions and millions of times if you listen to music on a regular basis. It's something I think all of us should be in very good control of. And it's a 5-note scale. It brings up a whole other set of challenges in terms of the finger shifts. And similar to the major scale we just looked at, there are tons of options. We can play playing 4 notes on one string there. I'm making my shift when I play A minor pentatonic, 1-4, 1-3, 1-3, 1-3, 3, 1-3. That's one way of going up. It's really easy to get into that 1-3 thing with your fretting hand. I'd encourage you to make sure you're working on as many 1-4 combinations as well to strengthen the pinky on your fretting hand. I'm trying to cram in as many 1-4 combinations there as possible. Like I said, really easy to get into that 1-3 box. In that iteration, there was only one time I was using my pinky. So if I go 1-4, slide to the D, 4, and then 1-4, 1-4, I can go 1-1-4-4. Now, of course, some of them aren't going to be as practical as others. When I get into that mode of like, okay, I must use as many pinky fingerings as possible, it's more of an exercise. It's more of a challenge. It's restrictive practice. It's saying, okay, we're going to work on this one thing. We're going to use the minor pentatonic to do it. I'm going to work out that pinky as much as possible. Again, as with the major scale, I would work the minor pentatonic around the cycle of fourths, all around the instrument, try and do it everything in 12 keys always. So from A minor, we'd go up to D minor. And I might challenge myself to do a different fingering on every single key change. So every time I move up a fourth, I'll try and do a different fingering. And perhaps if you're not ready for that, maybe you want to challenge yourself to make sure like every single time you move keys, you start on the same finger. But every time you do it, the entire cycle of 12 keys, make sure you do it starting on the first finger, one cycle, second finger, another cycle, third finger, another cycle, fourth finger. So you're working out the starting finger equally. You're building strength in all four fingers on your fretting hand. Okay, so our third scale, something I think is huge in my world. I come from a jazz background. I'm an improvising musician. I play a lot of dominant chord sounds, a lot of fives going to one. So the melodic minor is hugely important. Number one, in terms of knowing that specific foundational minor sound. And two, especially for jazz and for the kind of playing I do, the melodic minor gives us so many options when it comes to tension and release. So for the slightly more advanced player out there, or just anyone looking to get that sound into their playing, let's take a look at the melodic minor. Then we'll take a look at how the melodic minor relates to a dominant chord and how you get this very specific sound that if you listen to jazz, if you listen to dominant chords, 5 chords with tensions on them going to 1, you're going to hear this sound a lot. The melodic minor goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, minor third, 4, 5, natural 6, natural 7, 1. This is A flat melodic minor here. I'll play you harmonic minor just to give you a contrast. That has the flat 6 instead of the natural 6. That's harmonic minor, and this is melodic minor. Kind of accentuating that natural 6 a little louder than the rest of the notes. So that's our melodic minor. Again, just like the major, just like the pentatonic, is something I suggest you practice all over the instrument in 2 octaves, create exercises with it. That's exactly what the new scale book is all about. It's about giving you the scale isolated with tab, with standard notation, with fingerings. Really important that the entire new book comes with fingerings for every scale and every exercise. So I'm giving you a really strong foundational starting point as to where I think those scales and those notes sit best on the bass, on the neck of the instrument. But now with this melodic minor, now we have that information. Let's have a little listen as to how that relates to a dominant chord. So we have a G7 here, and that's the reason I started out with the A flat melodic minor. If you take your dominant chord, G7, and you play a melodic minor a half step up from that, it's exactly the scale we were just working on. But now when you play that A flat melodic minor over G7, you get this dominant sound, which is the altered scale. And the altered scale, put it into context, into theoretical context, the altered scale is the 7th mode of the melodic minor. So just as we have major modes, you may have heard of those before: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian or Locrian. We also have modes of other scales. We have modes of the harmonic major, of the harmonic minor, and of course of the melodic minor. Now the 7th mode, the mode that happens on the 7th degree of our melodic minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, our 7th mode, when we play A flat melodic minor, that 7th note is G. So if we play A flat melodic minor starting on the 7th degree of that scale, we have an altered scale. We have G altered. So if we can hear G7, 5 going to 1, G7 going to C minor in this case, so 5 to 1. Let's get that sound in our heads. And when we go to G, and then we resolve beautifully to C minor. So that's giving a little harmonic context for our scale exercise. I think that highlights the range, the scope, even just the beginning of the range and the scope of the melodic minor scale. The fact that it gives us this classic altered sound over dominant chords, I think that's super important to be aware of. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you stuck around this far, if you made it, if you're as much of a scale nerd as I am, I want to give you a little look inside the new book. Look at some of these other sort of weirder and crazier sounds that I've included that I think are really important for your technique, for your ear, for your general musicality, no matter what kind of music you play. And I'm really hoping that these sounds and these scales inspire you as much as they have inspired me to make music, to maybe write music, to find new sounds and new combinations of notes that go beyond our major and our minor pentatonic and our altered scales, things that are a little more common. When we get into sounds like harmonic major, for instance, it's quite common to hear harmonic minor, where you hear this sound. But if we change just one note, if we make it a major third instead of a minor third, suddenly we're into harmonic major sound. And the combination of an E natural and a G sharp here in a major tonality. We're starting on C for context. Totally different vibe. We've heard major already today. We've heard minor pentatonic. We've heard melodic minor. And now we're getting into this major, harmonic major sound. And that to me is just like the very first little step outside the norm. And it just, this kind of the sky is the limit. When you start to research and get into different cultures, different regions of the world, and this book is dealing with Western harmony. There's no microtonal music. There are no kind of Eastern scales and Indian ragas or anything like that. It's definitely Western music. But even with that, even with the confines of the 12 chromatic notes, the 12 notes in the chromatic scale, there are some really, really interesting sounds. There's a scale called the Ukrainian Dorian, for instance, which takes a Dorian scale, but raises the fourth. So you get another really interesting sound, something I've been exploring with my composition, with my writing, and it didn't take much to change it. Just one note to change a scale we all know so well. And even if you don't know the Dorian scale, you've heard it so many times in modern music. It's these little details that I hope to expose you to if you check out the book and help you uncover new lanes of music that perhaps you didn't know existed before. So I thank you very much for spending some of your insanely precious time here with me, talking about music, learning about the bass, digging in to scales and fingerings and multiple keys and all the stuff we looked at. And don't forget the new book, The Bassist's Book of Scales, Arpeggios and Studies, is available for pre-order below. That pre-order ends November 26th. The book comes out November 27th, 2024. It will be available on Amazon. It is going to be available digitally at my site. And of course, as with the pre-sale, you can get signed copies of the book. They ship worldwide here from my studio. Really appreciate you spending some time with me. See you guys soon.